Hello, everyone. The webinar will begin shortly. So, hello, everyone, and welcome to this Global Government Forum webinar looking at how getting information to the right people at the right time through identity systems can better connect government. My name is Richard Johnston, and I'm the executive editor of Global Government Forum, which is a media and events company focused on bringing together public and civil servants from around the world, and in today's case, particularly from the United States, to share best practice. And this webinar is on a very interesting and important topic. We at Global Government Forum know from our work with governments around the world that information sharing is vital to their work, and it can improve national security and increase collaboration across different agencies. And therefore, to meet this vital imperative, the US federal government has developed identity, credential, and access management policies known as ICAM that can help enable the right individual to have access to the right resources at the right time and for the right reason in order to support their agency's mission in government. So in this discussion, supported by our knowledge partner, Ping Identity, we are going to discuss how to build those secure systems that can protect government information and make sure that, as we said, the right information is available to the right people at the right time to support their government missions. We have a great panel to discuss this topic, but before I introduce them, I also want to invite you to get involved in today's discussion. Whatever device that you are using to watch along today, you should see a Q&A button. If you press that, that is where you can contribute your questions or perspectives for this conversation. We're keen to hear what are the obstacles to effective data sharing in your organization, and what do you think are the opportunities that can be unlocked from improving that situation. Please do get in touch using the Q&A button. We intend to put questions to both of our panelists throughout this session, so please don't wait if something comes to mind. Do share your thoughts with us. As I mentioned, we have two great panelists to discuss this topic with us today, so do let me introduce them. Firstly, we have Dr. Baber Kohli, who is Director of the Identity Assurance and Trusted Access Division, part of the Office of Technology Policy in the US General Services Administration. Baber is a results-orientated cybersecurity leader with hands-on experience within multiple cybersecurity domains, and he joined the GSA in November 2022 as Chief Cybersecurity Strategist and became the Director in August 2024. Aside from leading his division, Baber also serves as the co-chair of the Federal CISO Council Identity, Credential and Access Management Subcommittee. And prior to joining the GSA, he served the US federal government in various cybersecurity roles as a private contractor. And in this capacity, he served with the Department of Defense and multiple civilian agencies. So it's great to have you with us, Baber. We're also joined by Kelvin Brewer, who is the Director of Sales Engineering for US public sector at our knowledge partner, Ping Identity. Kelvin is a senior level information security leader with over 17 years of experience. He's a recognized subject matter expert in areas of identity, credential and access management, and zero trust, with a specific focus on US federal and state governments. Kelvin leads a team of public sector sales engineers and works directly with government agencies to deliver briefings, demonstrations, and software proof of concepts for the Ping Identity platform. Kelvin also serves as the Advanced Technology Academic Research Centre's industry chair for identity management, for its identity management working group, and is a regular speaker at industry events. So yes, thank you both for joining, and thank you to everybody who's joining us on this webinar too to watch along. And as I say, do please share your questions and thoughts with us to put to the panel as we go through the discussion. I wanted to kick off just with an opening question to you, Baber, to kind of set the stage a little bit. I've touched on it a little bit in my my opening remarks, but it'd be great to hear from you in terms of what is the opportunity of better information sharing in government? What is the objective that you are trying to get to at the GSA, and how is it kind of helping federal government organisations work better together?
Thank you so much, Richard, and good to be here with you, Kelvin. Really looking forward to this informative discussion. What a loaded question, Richard. So thank you for that. Information sharing can be complex. Today I'm speaking within my capacity as a division director serving, my division serves the entire federal government, mainly the CFO Act agencies, the 24 big ones, including the DoD, with FICAM, ICAM, PKI, and all things identity. My perspective in terms of information sharing and some of the opportunities, no shortage of opportunities across the government for better information sharing. There are many different examples, and one size does not fit all. What do I mean by that? U.S. government is pretty large, many organizations, and not all of them are connected together in many ways. And that's for good purposes. Different agencies and different organizations have different mission sets. Some of them, you can connect all of them, which we are calling it federation, for certain purposes and not in other ways, because what GSA does is going to be different than, for instance, what State Department or some of the other agencies are doing. In terms of opportunities, let's just take it at a smaller scale. Say, look at just one single organization. User experience is the top of mind that comes. And when I look at user experience, as an employee, I would like to see a single pane of glass. Okay, just, landing spot, then get to my, federal work, get to my federal benefits, get to all the other different aspects of and work and personal things that I have shared, for instance, with GSA. And I think those can be improved upon. And when you look at it across the federal government, across the enterprise, it becomes even more complex. We do have federated systems, but in not all cases. And sometimes in application level, we are sharing information across the government through their various federation means and landing zones, but that can be improved upon also. Maybe a federation hub, and then based on need to know. And going back to that user experience aspect, as employees, as civil servants, we want to make sure that all the people that we serve, in my case, my clients are federal agencies, and for all things identity and security. So I want to make sure that they have that information. We do it to simply put through our idmanagement.gov website. That's one way to share it. But again, like we can dissect that and define that, federation aspects and information sharing in many different cases, many use cases out there also. And when you look at it in terms of how do we share information with the public, that's a whole entire different ecosystem, whether it's benefits or services and other things. And on not all the things within the enterprise and sharing does not apply to them.
Great, thank you, Baba. Yes, totally appreciate that there are so many use cases in a organization, in individual organizations in the US federal government, and then of course many across the whole of the federal government itself. But that's a really useful and helpful scene setter in terms of different ways that better sharing of information can unlock benefits at different levels of the federal government. And building off that, I'm going to come to you, Kelvin, and just ask kind of how can Ping Identity help unlock the kind of better sharing that Baber has mentioned, kind of can be beneficial.
Yes, thank you, Richard, for the opportunity. I appreciate Global Government Forum for giving us this opportunity to have this webinar, and for Baber for joining me on this. There's a couple thoughts that I've had as I've thought about this. Some of the challenges that we faced, as Baber mentioned, is the different use cases that the different agencies have in the federal government and how they need to share data. And there is some unique differences between the agencies, but there's also some similarities, and the ability to do, as Baber mentioned, a federation hub type of a model where the data that can be shared allows for a reduction in duplication of information among the federal government workforce, as well as helps with citizen services so that more agencies can provide a more combined pane of glass um, for their constituents, allows for, and that's something that Ping Identity is focused on, is allowing and facilitating that safe information sharing between agencies where that is appropriate, and then also focusing on the importance of each agency having their own identity provider that allows them to focus on that data that they can't share, and determining how that then applies to what the workforce or the constituents, citizens, or partners should get access to in the different use cases they have. And that's where I think flexibility is so important, whether it's deployment flexibility and the ability to deploy a solution that has feature parity for cloud or on-prem, but also the ability to, which Ping provides, is the ability to also have different use cases deployed for different situations, but still provide this same feature set. And so that flexibility deployment, but also the importance of preventing information sharing where it's appropriate, where information shouldn't be shared, which is so vital in this. Information sharing is great, but also preventing information sharing is important. And my personal opinion is that there are many challenges with technologies today, but one of those that I think is important is to focus on how to make sure a cloud deployment is secured. And one of the things that Ping is focused on is in government providing single tenant architectures to also increase that security to prevent data sharing where it shouldn't be happening, and then through federation improve the opportunity to share data.
Great, thank you very much, Kelvin. Yeah, I think we're going to cover both aspects of that. Yeah, the prevention of data being shared where it shouldn't be, and the opportunities. I kind of framed it at the start of the conversation as the kind of positive opportunity there. But I mean, let's go into and look into that the prevention side as well, because I appreciate that is obviously a big issue for governments in terms of boosting their security. To bring Baber back in here, I mean, how big is the problem that governments faces in areas like identity fraud and protecting information so that it isn't shared with people who shouldn't have access to it?
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Fraud is another really big topic, and it has been around for a very long time, and a lot of opportunities to contribute both in terms of industry and government. I wish I could give you a scale on how big or how small it is, but I will just leave that to audience to kind of use your imagination, use your search engine of your choice, and take a look at it. There's no shortage of articles out there in terms of fraud, different perspectives. But one thing for sure is that we do the best with the best intent with our industry partners to secure all our assets. And the intent is to secure it, make it resilient. And we're moving towards shatterproofing because resilience doesn't seem to be enough, or it's not going to be, especially once you start advancing in some of the other technologies. And identity systems alone is a very core component of technology stack. But on its own, it can only do so much. So we have to consider other technological stack. Also, Calvin mentioned the cloud, better use of cloud, better configuration management. And if you were to go and search, I read a lot of articles, and most of these things, most of the time, data is exposed is based on some sort of a human error. Technology was provided, it was configured, and configuration management early on, my job before GSA was vulnerability management for multiple, agencies when I was supporting a different agency. So one thing that I figured out early on was policy is amazing, but implementation is even harder. And that has to bring us to configuration management. And most of it is going back to the human aspects of it. And I don't think anyone is intentionally leaving doors open. Right. So we have to be right 100% of the time, while the adversary have to be right just one time, and that's what happens. Many different forms of fraud also. ID fraud can be looked at many different lenses. Is it, stealing your benefits? Is it stealing your personally identifiable information? Someone stealing your health information. So again, it's just another one of those that you can dissect it further and do a bigger, deeper dive. And if it is benefits, that's its own core problem. And if it is just like reusing, replicating, Richard, for instance, your identity for something, and that's another problem. And having done some research within the dark web before I really knew what ICAM and FICAM was, I knew identity access management as a cyber professional. I did a ton of research tracking down bad guys within the darknet. What is the darknet? It's not someone's basement. It's part of the internet. There is only one internet, but it's just a configuration that's different. It's the attribution management that's different. And there are ways, there's anything that you can imagine, you can find it there. And if you look hard enough, you can find it. And part of it was just the PII type of data, mostly for fraudulent use, and adversarial intent is going to be different. Sometimes people steal it just for fame and fortune. Sometimes they're trying to get financial gain. Other times just to embarrass someone. Different motivators. So it is a problem, which I don't have the answer on how big, how small, but I think that's an area that needs significant attention. So before I turn it over to you, back to you, Richard, I want to mention one piece of contribution that my team, contributed towards in terms of identity fraud detection. We're calling it a playbook. It's a really good launch pad. It's on idmanagement.gov. If you go click on play.
Oh, I think you've frozen for us there, Babar. Hopefully you'll come back in the room in a second. But yes, you were just directing people towards the playbook there.
Better now?
Yes. You were
Okay,
just
Richard, I don't know
telling
where
people where
I
they could
froze.
find you were telling people where they could find the playbook.
Oh, yes. So our contribution, my team's contribution here within Office of Technology Policy, Identity Assurance Trusted Access Division, idmanagement.gov. There are different menu items up top. If you click on Playbook, scroll down kind of halfway through the page, you will find something that's called ID Fraud Detection Playbook. And this is just a starting point. And, but we were as inclusive as we could be to bring these things and make it more generally available so people can start thinking about it. And thanks to our colleagues and partners at DARPA that provided the technical support, we did use their Semaphore program, which is a robust platform for synthetic media, digital forgery, which people know it as deepfake detection. Amazing, incredible opportunity there. And again, that's just a starting point. Richard, back to you.
Thanks very much, Babar. And yeah, Kelvin, to come to you on that point, you work with different agencies and departments across government. How would you characterize the threat that they face?
It's an interesting scenario we're in because social engineering is going to happen. We can educate people. We can work to lower the attack vector there for social engineering, but education will only go so far. And we know that social engineering is going to succeed sometimes. And people are going to get information, whether, as Bobber mentioned, they get it from the dark web because it's been exposed through hacking or other means, or it's because they've become friends with somebody who's a GSA employee. They figure out how to get information and they're able to compromise an account or whatever they do to get access to resources. One of the challenges there is a lot of times with fraud detection, we have focused our efforts on recognizing the fraud at the transaction level. By the time the transactions happened, a lot of times, whether we catch it, hopefully we catch it before the transactions happen, but a lot of times if we catch it during the transaction, money's already changed hands, hacking's already happened, whatever is happening, that's when we're catching things. And what we're focused on in the identity space is catching it before that based on risk signals that are kicked up as, that the Babber mentioned their playbook, which is so important, is catching those signals during the authentication and authorization processes based on risk signals that are generated, based on identity verification that needs to happen, or maybe some friction that we put in place during the authentication and authorization process because of risk signals that we've seen. And that way we can capture and catch fraud before it gets to the transaction, whatever that transaction is, whether that transaction is a transfer of data, is a financial transaction, or it may even be where they're getting access to some administrative access that they shouldn't have through social engineering. Whatever that transaction is, we want to catch it long before then, move that needle over to catching it during the authentication and authorization so that they don't ever get to the point where they can actually transact something.
Great. That's a really interesting point. And if I can just follow up on that, how difficult is it to build systems that are able to spot those signs as they appear? How yeah, is that I imagine that is quite technically difficult.
Yeah, and there is a number of vendors that are working on that, including Ping Identity, where we have solutions that watch risk signals. Some of them are common risk signals that a lot of people can see. Others are system-specific risk signals that we have, for our solutions in Ping Identity that we capture through the authentication and authorization processes, through, seeing things that we know about users, different attributes we have, and understanding their normal behaviors. Behavior analytics is important. Also being able to capture things like bot attacks and man in the middle. There's a number of different vectors that we can look at that are risk signals that then allow us to see that this is a bad actor, possibly, that there's a high risk to this effort that's unusual. And then it gives an agency the ability to then decide how to proceed. Whether they want to block a transaction, whether they want to add some friction, like prompting again for an MFA or reprompting for identity verification, especially in the case of constituents and citizens, the ability to say, we need to re-verify your identity because of whatever's happening, gives you the ability then to challenge them. And, we're going to be talking about AI later, and I won't get into that, but, bringing AI into the picture also gives us additional tools, but also creates additional challenges in the detection of fraud.
Great. You've teed me up beautifully there, Kelvin, because I was going to ask about AI now, and yeah, I'll come to you on it again first, and then Babber. Yeah, does AI change if we go on the threats element first? Change the threats that governments are going to face?
It certainly does. I mean, one of the things that's happening now is AI is getting smart enough with video generation that I've seen this recently at a conference I've been at, where someone took 5 minutes and using a common AI tool generated a video of somebody holding up a driver's license to an identity verification system and passing a liveness check. So an AI generated video of somebody that is real was able to fake an identity verification process. And that creates some very unique challenges for things that we think are common gates that will prevent fraud. And one of the things that we're seeing that's an up and coming threat within this is agentic AI, which is, possibly we can at some point have agents that will do things for us, like watch when our taxes are due and file them for us. or watch when a flight has a certain price and make the transaction to buy the flight for us. And putting those boundaries, but also realizing the ethical implications of something acting in our behalf is something that is creating some very unique challenges, because when you have a computer that has been given permission to enact a transaction for an individual, that also opens up huge amounts of fraud potential. But can we prevent the technology from going in that direction? No, we can't. And so we are looking at, as vendors, we're looking at uh, how we can recognize fraud that has been generated by AI, and what's the differences, and what are the indicators, and how do we then go and increase a risk signal to give an agency the ability to then kick off something, some sort of friction that the AI wouldn't be able to pass, but an individual could. And those are things that are still in development. Those are things that are still being determined. And we're working with, ATARC that's been mentioned that I work with. We're working with NIST in the US to figure out how to recognize these AI challenges, and but also leverage AI to give us more rich signals that then enable us with things like generative AI to recognize risk signals that are more apparent, because AI is smart. AI can see things that maybe people can't. And so then we're able to catch risk signals that wouldn't be there, that we wouldn't recognize otherwise. And so AI is giving us some benefits and increasing security, but it's also bringing in a lot of risk that we're still trying to figure out how to react to. And things aren't quite advanced enough that it's an undoable challenge, but we want to make sure that we're ahead of it as it's developing.
That's really interesting, both the potential benefits of AI in protecting data and the potential threats that it can play. Bauer, to bring you in on that, how do you think about the the threats from AI, and potentially how you could use it to tackle them?
Absolutely. So Calvin mentioned a really good point. AI generated, what was it, video? So the same playbook that I mentioned, it is for synthetic media. So the tool exists at a GOTS product with unlimited rights to US government use. And of course, industry is either developing, or there are industry developed programs out there also. So the way that I look at AI, I look at it just like another piece of technology that's transformative, as part of the digital ecosystem. Just like we have a platform that we were talking, what was it, like maybe a decade ago? It used to be totally different, just a different vendor, maybe not as future rich. So AI is, just like any technology, large language models or agentic AI, whichever form that you're looking at it. And then, of course, people are working on general artificial intelligence also. It can be enabler or a disabler. That just depends on the intent. And of course, these are made for good purposes. And there are, people with bad intention, they're going to use it for adversarial means. Whether it's deepfake, creating someone's video just to embarrass them, or the using it for identity verification or liveliness detection is what Calvin said earlier in terms of that. So technology does exist here and there, but it can be, but probably not robust enough in all cases, and maybe not accessible for the entire government today. And another example, what my team worked on with a different agency, is looking at document forgeries based on text detection. So we're talking about ID cards, pictures, video, audio. I think we have figured that out for the most part. We just need to make it government-wide offering so more people, more agencies can use it. I mean, identity systems alone aren't going to be able to do all of it, specifically with fraud, because ID systems, majority, of course, it has your traditional cybersecurity in terms of one of the phrases earlier. I'm going to paraphrase Calvin, which I really like. Detection is the new prevention, right? Detect those signals early on, not after the fact. But currently, maybe we are playing first responders. Something happens, and then it's the cleanup. And there are like capabilities as long as we think about non-traditionally. That's what my team does to get them as soon as they start interacting on the web page. And there are those type of signals also. You can do that through content delivery networks, which My team has a few different solutions out there based on our research, idmanagement.gov experiments tab. It's just like a really totally different way to look at it. Zero trust, least privilege is kind of part of the conversation. We haven't mentioned it yet. So tools and technologies exist there, and the way that I'm looking at AI is a huge enabler, right? And that's how we are using it. Um, Long ago, maybe about a year and a half ago, my division started experimenting at a smaller scale on how different large language models worked with identity policy. We have something called FICAM matrix on our website. It's very complex, maybe, I don't know, 50, 100 documents. Each one is between 3 to 200 pages. Calvin is super familiar with those. These are executive orders, NIST guidelines, standards, laws, regulations, you name it. There's a lot of really good content out there. You know, going through that, you know, and reviewing it, just comparing two sets of documents, you know, it's time consuming. At best, we may get it right, you know, most of the time or sometimes. But using LLMs, we have expedited that process, which means time saving for the human analyst. I rather spend 2 minutes getting the answer and another 15 minutes packaging that up, cleaning it up, validating, and then sending it to someone. And that's really good. That's way better than a week. You know, if I give you like 350-page document, you need like 2 months to go through it. Even if you're a SME in that subject, right? Because all of those are subjective. It's open for interpretation. I have never seen two individuals, two professionals interpret the same, you know, say the security control for identity the same way. And you know, there's meaning behind it. There's good intent because of the flexibility that it provides. So in those cases, LLMs are very powerful. And in terms of, we haven't gone to chatbots, agentic AI, and I think that's going to be a game changer also. And there's no getting away from it. And that's why we start early in terms of experimenting, proof of concept, and then sharing that knowledge. That's why I love webinars as such, so we can have informative discussion and talk about these important issues, and maybe in the process provide something a bit different.
Great, thank you, Baba. That was really interesting there about the potential of AI, and yes, indeed, how people and systems interact around security, and that's what I want to come on to next, in terms of what are the biggest challenges to implementing better ID systems in government. Would you say, Kelvin, that this, sorry, Baba, that this is a technology problem or a people problem primarily?
Yeah, so another really good one. Thank you, Richard. So I see cybersecurity, identity, technology, the people versus people game. Even when you have bots interacting with each other, you know, in most likely cases, 99.9%, the way that I look at it, the way that I understand it, in my perspective, a human being made it that way. You know, running a script, automating it, whatever that is, automation tools, behavioral tools, it's a human that put that together. And most importantly, humans created these technologies. So humans will always be the superior when it comes to technology versus human. But at the same time, you know, our memory, you know, no matter where we are at in the career ladder, it can only hold so much. And what does that mean? We have to be agile. And then it's easy to be complacent and be like, yep, business as usual. It's been working for the past 20 years. No problem. Don't worry about it until something happens. And when something happens, it's too late. And that brings me back to the first responder game. So we have to be proactive and we have to be saying the things that everyone is thinking. They just don't want to say it. Maybe they don't want to hurt someone else's feeling. I don't have any problems with it. As long as it's appropriate, just put it out there. And I think that's part of that, you know, joining the public service. And I do see both. But mostly one perspective is the way that I define it, technology, AI, identity systems, human versus human. It really comes to the human. That's the more difficult part. We have professionals that have been in the industry, in the government for a very long time. They're amazingly great at their job, but maybe lack that ability to think ahead. And maybe they're not thinking within, you know, 2025, technological advancements, whether it's AI, ping identity, or some cloud and all of that, right? If you really think about it, like AI became mainstream because of ChatGPT, but machine learning has been going back to decades, maybe 80s, looking at malware analysis or detection, all of that. So that's one of them. And then because we are humans, I think we can build better versus bigger. And there are amazing companies out there that build really, really amazing products. And once in a while, you see others that are so humongously big, and it's just the interoperability is missing. All the security features are missing. It works as intended, but not as resilient. Maybe not as feature rich, right? And that's going to bring some of the competition also. So going back to end this segment on my part, I look at it from human aspect. We cannot change culture. That's not what I'm asking for. Okay, so, and if you want to change my culture, you have to give me at least 2 decades, 20 years, and there is some research behind that. But what you could do is tweak my behavior a bit. Hey, yes, PKI works. It will continue to work. But what about these other use cases? What are we going to do in terms of citizen services? You're not going to put them through background check, right? Because PKI is tied to background check and the vetting process before you can get your PIV card that I'm using here. On DoD's case, CAC card. And that brings us the opportunity to really think different, do different, and say the things that other people are thinking and not saying.
Thank you, Babar. I'll bring you in there, Kelvin. I thought that was really interesting, Babar's point of view about the this being a human versus human problem, and that humans are the ones that are trying to both design these systems to be secure and then to try and beat them. But that kind of being the case, as it were, where does the technology fit into it? How can you make the technology best work with how the humans are trying to both kind of crack these systems and design them in the most secure way?
Well, I think there's some important, you know, there's some important things that Babar brought up that I think we need to, drill down on from a technology perspective, because people have, as he said, it takes a couple decades for someone to change their behavior, and or for a group to change their behavior, for things to change in a monumental shift. And so tweaks to behavior have to happen over time. And one of the things that we've seen as an industry, identity industry, is that users, whether they're workforce in the government or they're constituent citizens, whatever their role is in these situations, they are getting tired of friction. My wife will go in and need to do something online, and she'll see that it requires her to create an account. And she will call me and say, do you already have an account with this group? And is that password shared in our password manager? Because I do not want to create another password. Can I just use your account? And is there any challenges with that? Because people are just tired of friction. They don't want to create another account. They don't want to manage another password. They don't want to have all of these things that make them jump through hoops to get access to what they need. And that happens in the workplace too. That's one of the things that is great about the PKI systems that the federal government uses, is that it is vetted very strongly beforehand before a user gets access to a PIV card. And then they have a very secure way of accessing things that, beyond them having to re-enter their PIN number every little bit to create some friction, it gives them the ability to quickly access what they need. And so it reduces friction. And that, in my opinion, also reduces fraud. It reduces social engineering, because they can easily protect, in general, they can easily protect that asset without having to go through a lot of friction. And that's the thing that we have to be careful of with people, is making sure that we don't make it so hard that they are focused on how do we reduce the amount of effort I have to go through to get access, and then they make it insecure. Like, the most common password is lowercase the word password. And that is there because people just don't want the friction. And so they want things that are easy. And so, that makes it easy also for the bad guys to go in and get access to things. They can socially engineer things like, for PIN numbers that are 8-digit PIN numbers, people usually pick 10 different dates that are meaningful to them in their lives and rotate those with their PIN numbers. And you know, if I'm social engineering, I'm going to focus on so when's your anniversary and when were your kids born, and you know, those kind of things. And so there are the people factor is always going to be a concern. And what we have to focus on with technology and, you know, verified credentials, I think is somewhere we're headed that's helpful in this area, but it's reducing the friction for people, making it easier for them, whether it's a worker or it's a citizen. It makes it easier for them to get access, but doing so securely. And that's where, you know, to kind of wrap this up, that's also where watching risk signals is so important, because if I see that the behavior is normal, keystroke patterns are normal, user time, you know, access time is usually when they're accessing those assets. There's no risk signals. I can lower friction for a user. I can make it easier for them to get access to things, and then, you know, then they see this as something that they're willing to do because friction is lessening. And then when I see risk signals go up, I can increase friction. And that is where we're able to use things like machine learning and AI to make things smarter so that the individuals have a better experience. The people have a better experience. And in my opinion, when people are happier with the technology, it makes them more willing to do what they need to be secure, and it opens the door less for fraud.
Great. That was a excellent response. Now, I want to broaden the conversation out slightly to kind of zero trust. I think Babu, you mentioned it there, but I'll go to you, Kelvin, in the first instance. Where does the zero trust principles and the kind of yeah, thinking behind that approach fit within that universe that you set it out? How would you classify kind of zero trust in this landscape?
Well, I think we've been talking about principles of zero trust the whole time. And that is basically that we want to vet somebody for whatever access level they're going to get. And we have to set that standard of what that vetting is based on the kind of access they need. It's different for someone who's in the government workforce versus somebody who is a citizen constituent, because they're getting access to different things. And there's different amount of sensitivity to the data that they're accessing. And even within the workforce, you have different levels of sensitivity. So you have to have different levels of access. But it's the vetting up front that really matters in the zero trust framework. And then it's watching the risk signals like we've been talking about. That is the key in the identity space for zero trust, is watching the risk signals and reacting to what they tell you to do. And if we're able to proactively in real time react to risk signals and enforce friction when it's needed, it will strengthen our zero trust stance in regards to identities, whether those are non-person identities, or they are physical identities. We have to figure out ways to, you know, the old agentic, back in the day, the old thing we used to talk about is, you know, trust but verify. But now we're saying don't trust as a stance, and then as the person comes in, constantly verify. And that's really what we're trying to do, is constantly look at those risk signals and verify that this person's still trusted at every point, every transaction. You know, it's are they switching apps? Are they moving, doing things that are abnormal behavior? Every chance we get, we check. At every transaction, we check to make sure something hasn't changed that increases the risk. And that's really the key in my opinion, in the zero trust framework for reducing the risk to an organization.
Great, thank you. And yeah, Baba, you mentioned zero trust as well. Um, how would you characterize its role in this universe? Zero trust, I think, is a phrase that perhaps more and more people are becoming aware of, and it is kind of used conceptually to kind of sum up a lot of these ideas. Is that a framing that you think kind of the federal government, that federal employees are on board with and people understand?
I like your framing, and Calvin covered most of it. A little bit of different perspective on that. When I hear about zero trust, I look at it from least privilege, because least privilege has been around, and every time someone asks me, help me achieve zero trust, and we have resources on idmanagement.gov. That's one of the sliders on the main page. It says, okay, this is how FICAM help you based on the resources we had. And of course, M2209, executive order, their OMB memo M2209, kind of, really mandated that agencies start going towards zero trust. And so that's where the conversation starts. What are you doing in terms of least privilege? How are you managing, say, a small organizational folders before you start getting into much of bigger type of like the entire enterprise? And there are tools that does a really good job of help assisting with that. Calvin brought up something else, which is very, very important. So identity proofing is the most difficult part in terms of, unmasking an individual so that we give the right person their benefits or the services, not just someone that, submitted a forged document or a forged ID. And then there's the non-person entities. What are we going to do with machine identities? And I think in many ways, tools that do exist, which Calvin also mentioned that to help with that, picking up in those signals. And I think more can be done in that ID proofing. Does technology exist? I think so. Are we really leveraging best parts of different technologies? I don't know the answer because I'm more on the, governance and the policy type of a shop, even though all the work that we do is practical. We have a physical access control lab, and part of it is automated, and then other part is just automation is not a possibility unless we put robots to pick up a PIV or a CAC card with certificate and go to a physical access system and then tap to make sure that it works as intended or otherwise. Maybe we'll get to that at some point. There are many different maturity models out there. CISA is one of them, which is really good. And if you look at it, when I look at it as a cyber professional, I wish that identity pillar was across the board, across data, network, devices, and then continuous monitoring across the board. But then again, I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm just giving you one example in my perspective. And I think because everything has identities, you have to. IP addresses for a server, in many ways, that's the server's identity, whether it's rotating or not. And if you can pick up on the signal over time, you're going to look at that behavior, connect all the dots, patterns, right, in terms of how machines are working. And then there are patterns in humans also. Very loaded and really, really good. And some of the earlier articles that I read on Zero Trust, it was the person, I don't remember the gentleman's name, that coined this term. I think he was talking about, physical security, starting from inside out. But traditionally, we're looking at from outside in. Fortify all your firewalls, fortify your networking stuff. Don't worry about it. If they cannot get through it, I think your resources are good. If I were to do it, I would start from the data. And most important data first, because not everything needs the highest amount of security, because it's just going to be inaccessible. Going back in terms of user experience, or Calvin put it as friction. When people are frustrated, that's when they make the most amount of mistakes. The easier, the simpler that you can make towards through technology, the better it is. I'm a happier employee. I'm a happier supervisor. I'm a happy citizen because I don't have to have 50 accounts. I avoid accounts also where possible, and I don't use password managers. Again, that's another tech, and I think some have been cracked also. So there are like different mechanisms, but there are a lot of opportunities to get to zero trust maturity quicker by using technologies that do exist. And in some cases, we really have to go back to the foundations, least privilege. Not exactly the same, but if you can get least privilege right, some of your basic access controls, some of your base level controls right, hopefully that's going to give you that, motivation to now work on a little bit harder stuff, data tagging, for instance, and a little bit behavioral things. When a lot of the machines are changing, when you're flipping through devices, it could be a nightmare for someone that's sitting in an operation center type of environment. I have worked at also. But since then, this was like 3, 4 years ago. But since then, we have amazing tech that can pick it up as soon as there's interaction at any part of your enterprise. So there's a lot of faith and hope, and I think we can do better. And I do think technology exists. but I haven't seen just one single tech that has all the answers yet, at least not up until today.
I saw you nodding away there, Kelvin. Do you want to come in and follow up on any of Baber's last points there?
Yeah, Baber made some great points on that, and I think you know, the challenge that we have here is that trust is key with figuring out when to trust with least access. You know, he's talking about least privilege. I think that's an important principle in zero trust, and I'm glad he brought that up, because if we don't identify the data that we have to protect the most, which, you know, the government, U.S. government uses their clearance levels, their security, you know, whether it's secret, top secret, sensitive, you know, there's all these different ratings for the data. And that's so important because it allows us to identify the data that needs to be protected the most and what standards we should apply to that data. And then that determines, based on need to know, who gets access to that data. And when you're looking at the technologies, I think Baber's exactly right. I don't think there's a technology that is going to go in and provide all the answers. Most of us as vendors, we look at the importance of partnering with different technologies to figure out how to package a technology bundle that will meet the needs of users. And that is a moving target all the time because of innovation, because of the changes that we've already been discussing in technologies, including AI. And you know, I think one of the key technologies that has been groundbreaking in zero trust and in the stuff that we're doing, and at Ping Identity, we've really embraced this. It's the ability to orchestrate. And that gives us the ability to tie in all these different technologies into a single place. You can orchestrate processes that reduce or increase friction, as we've been talking about, and watch for signals. But orchestration is so important because it gives the people, the administrators, the ability to quickly build processes that follow a standard and can easily be tested, instead of having to write scripts and code that then allow us to build out how we work with identities, person and non-person identities, how we work with them, what processes they need to follow and why. And that's key to managing this, because, you know, like Barbara was talking about, the importance of identifying machines and everything, you know, the different devices that people are coming in on or trying to access the environment on, or, you know, things like that. I think making the technology more consumable and configurable in an easier way, and orchestration helps with that, makes it so that we make less mistakes, and makes it so that we can quickly leverage things as new technologies come out. And that's going to be a continued innovation that's got to improve, and something that will impact zero trust. And you know, pretty much everything we've been talking about is that ability to orchestrate processes that are easy to manage and easy to deploy and impact immediately the security of an organization.
Great, and just I wanted to follow up on that, Kelvin, because you mentioned something that I always find interesting in these discussions. The different environments, different kind of technology stacks that organizations are working off. I mean, I know the UK government through my location here in London a bit better than I know the US government, but I know departments have often vastly different technology stacks that they are running services off, and often they can be quite old systems that have been built up over a long period of time, incrementally, to deliver very important public services. So I'm always interested in discussions around kind of deploying these identity protection tools. Is it the same when you go in to speak to a government organization, regardless of what technology they are themselves using, or do you have to kind of tailor your solution to the systems that organizations are running on, and are the threats and problems the same?
Well, and I know Baber, I'm sure he has some great opinions on this as well, but you know, I think the one of the things that we see when we're going and presenting our technology to different government agencies, different groups, is that they all have different technologies, as you said, and those technologies range from legacy, including mainframes that are very old, all the way up to homegrown applications and lots of COTS applications that they're running on premise, as well as cloud applications. And the challenge for an identity vendor is that we need to support all of those technologies and secure them properly, whether it's using agents, which is kind of the old way of doing things, or using reverse proxies, and then moving into standards-based identity management, which involves using things like, if we're talking about authentication and not lifecycle management, we're talking about authentication, then we're looking at things like SAML and OIDC and the standards-based, which is really changing our approach to identity over time, is being able to work to with government and as industry, work together to create these standards that we can then all use to make sure that we're protecting people better. So that means no matter the vendor you're looking at, they all do SAML, they all do OIDC, and we're working with NIST to increase and improve standards. Like for, one of the things that at Ping Identity we really focus on is being on all these standards boards and in working with NIST, making sure that we're part of developing standards, like, for example, the new verified identity standard that NIST is trying to develop to establish a standard for verified identities for the country so that we can do things like mobile driver's licenses. And those standards need to be done at a national level. And then we need to even cooperate internationally so that we can work with other countries, other governments, to understand how they're deploying mobile driver's license, mobile identities, for example, verified identities that we can then recognize and work with. And so as identity standards are progressing, that's really the important thing, is that we have standards-based identity management that all vendors work with, so that we're not one-offing how we do things, and that allows us to tighten the standards that then increases security.
Before I bring Baber in on that, to respond to that, I just will get a little plug in for the work at Global Government Forum. We do a lot of work on how governments are developing digital identity and credentials around things like driving license. In the UK, for example, the government's just announced it's going to launch a digital driver's license this year. So there is a lot of work going on, I know, in administrations across the world on that, and that kind of collaboration is those are the kind of conversations that we at GGF very much like to convene, such as this one. Yes, Bauer, Kelvin mentioned that obviously you will be dealing with a lot of organizations with lots of different tech stacks when you have these conversations with them. How big a factor is the technology that you are dealing with when you're trying to solve some of these problems?
It's a major factor. There are some legacy systems depending on your organization, and there are some more modern systems also, but mostly I would say mix. And I think that going back to the people aspect, sometimes certain agencies wouldn't know where to start. And if I were to put my client shoes or client hat just for a second, and if I want to hear from a vendor, I would like to know ins and outs of their technology, even better if they know what our challenges are. And there are some vendors that do a very good job. There are others that are just starting off. There is no right or wrong. A lot of people are like, hey, I can solve your problem. And then my immediate question is, what do you think my problem is? They're like, you need to tell me. At least it's a conversation starter, right? Calvin, Ping Identity has been involved in many different parts of the US government, including NIST, as he mentioned. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing to share knowledge, share more about their technologies and capabilities. And if we're not getting the word out, it's just not going to work. Coming back to some of my division activities, I mentioned it's government-wide. We don't sell technologies, but we do have guides out there. For instance, I'm not going to go and talk about the specific ones. It'd be really cool to have a guide, based on Ping Identity's offering for the US government, and put it out there also. How do you configure it? How do you best manage it? How do you use it? And PKI is one part of it. It doesn't, fit or check all the boxes. There are a lot of applications, public key infrastructure, the way it has been designed for really good purposes, very robust. It just simply doesn't work. Say 3-4 years ago, USB pass-through was a problem. I used to have 4 different cards for 4 different purposes, because you have to have, 4 different accounts. And then a list of username passwords. And I'm not really saying that, I'm not implying I used to write it down, but it has to be in my head, right? You authenticate to your laptop and then a virtual machine. Now it's username password game. In some cases, MFA was a challenge, and I think it still is. It goes both ways, and I think that's why collaboration as such is very important, open dialogue. And then again, just pick the best parts of, different offerings to make your stack, and that's when you're going to see magical things happen. And looking at it, some of the implementers, I call them in the trenches. It's very tough for them also. You have been working with a certain technology stack, you know it very well. Now I'm gonna bring on Sprinkle and something else, especially without telling you how that would integrate within your current systems. Or there has been times without mentioning names, people have purchased products and then figure out that it didn't meet a lot of the standards that we have to follow in terms of US government. The good part is it was like very small scale and it was good. Like it wasn't breaking the bank, but that's just money spent. And if we had that research prior, and that's what my team does, do it once so you can use it many times. And of course, this was unintentional, right? Probably many cases that happens. So those are the other things that we need to be considering also in terms of technologies. And I'll take it back. Like everything that we do, I ask my team and myself, why? What problem are we trying to solve? If digital forgery is a problem, well, we made the playbook. It's out there, right? Or identity proofing is a problem. We have a best practices guide, non-authoritative. That's why I decided to put the experiments tab on ID management for the rest of the research that we are doing, that I call it our contribution. And it takes all of us to solve all of these. And a tremendous amount of opportunities out there. So, and good dialogue is key. That's what I love from vendors like Ping. Tell me everything about what your technology does. Then let me connect the dot because I know who needs what. All right, that's my job to connect those dots also. But not a intermediate, not a resale type of focus. That's not what I'm implying. But if you go and look at our guides, you know exactly what we're talking about, and this is nothing new to us.
Thank you very much, Baba. That's really good. And yes, very much in the spirit of dialogue, I will make one last call to anyone watching along who has any questions for our panel. Please do submit them now because we're going to start wrapping up shortly. And to jump on that point that Bauer made there about the opportunity. I started our conversation today focusing on the opportunity of better sharing information across government and what can be unlocked. We often hear as well in governments around the world that cybersecurity and focuses on improved kind of risk management can be an enabler of different, or can be an enabler of improved services. That's cybersecurity is a good way to get people in government focused on tackling legacy. And if you're building more secure systems, then there are kind of natural technology upgrades that follow from that. So I want to come to Kelvin just to perhaps to start kind of sharing some concluding thoughts, and then I'll come to Baber. How do you think this conversation around zero trust and greater security can help kind of catalyze greater improved technologies across government? Is it something that can catalyze more responsive services for citizens and for public servants themselves?
That's a great question, Richard. And I think that's where collaboration is just so vitally important, whether it's within individual countries, between agencies within a government, even cross, nationalities. The type of collaboration that we need to make identity a better technology stack and more more able to solve the problems that exist. It's all about collaboration, and that's why I think it's important, and why I co-chair HARC Identity Management Group, is that importance of collaboration between vendors, between industry and government is just so important for us to take those opportunities to talk to each other and be in some ways product agnostic, where I can step back and say, as an identity expert, I'm not talking Ping Identity and touting all of the great things I think about the product that I love. But what I'm looking at is this is a problem that's happening with concerns that I care about in the US government, with whether it's federal or whether it's the states in the US government, in the US, and looking at those problems and working with my counterparts at some companies that I would consider competitors and saying, how do we solve this problem? Now we're going to go back and find ways to solve the problem and apply it technologically in the way that we feel is appropriate. But those conversations are so vital in finding ways to solve the problems that are there. And what GSA is doing, what Babbers Group is doing with identity management.gov is so vital, because they're sharing their perspectives on how to solve problems within the federal government. And that impacts industry, it impacts other companies that are trying to secure their identities, it impacts citizens. And that's the important thing is, I think Ping Identity's stack of technologies is going to solve a lot of problems. Do I think it solves every problem? No. And do I want it to solve every identity problem? I hope we can get there. But we need to collaborate, and we need to collaborate with a lot of smart people to do it. And that's going to be collaborating, like on webinars like this with Babber. It's going to be collaborating on working groups. It's going to be collaborating in ways that make it so we can identify real problems and figure out real solutions. And that's where I think it's so important that we have these conversations.
Great, thank you very much, Kelvin. And yes, indeed, as I've been fascinated by this conversation. It's been great. I'm just going to come to you, Baba, for some kind of closing thoughts and perhaps any thoughts on the point I made to Kelvin about how kind of identity management and can kind of catalyze better technology across government.
Absolutely. Going back to that mindset shift, we need to be proactive. We need to be super passionate, say the things other people are thinking, not necessarily saying. And I call it opportunities, not risks. So we need to capitalize on those opportunities. If and if all that happens, then I think we have a greater chance of success in IT modernization, for instance, and digital transformations. These are other, buzzwords that you see often. But then under the hood, it may not be exactly, how it's being communicated. And then collaborations through working groups. I lead a few. I have people in my team that are part of different ones, and that's a really good venue to bring all the folks from industry that want to play nice, all the people from the government that want to play nice, to really openly share and go after these open standards. And we are doing that also, but then I think we can enhance those capabilities. I'm a big fan of experimentation, Richard, or proof of concept, as some call it. You don't have to go and change your entire organization and get all these new technologies. And probably it's definitely not recommended. Extremely difficult. But there's only two options. You either take the chance to experiment, do a proof of concept, and if it works for you, in majority of the cases, it's going to end up working because technology is really good. I have had hands-on with some of them. So, and if that works, then you have to work on scaling it. And that's what we love doing within my division, experiments. Whether it's like LLMs, you experiment with it. We have a couple of experimentation that are going on. That's why Experiment Tab was there. And then the other part is probably the most important part. Collaborating and knowledge sharing and trading notes with others that are in the community, whether it's the government, academia, non-for-profit, industry, all fair game, especially where I sit. My job is, government-wide, connecting the best and the brightest with agencies to help solve their problems. Us alone cannot do it, and we have not been able to do it, up until today. But what we are really good at is bring everyone together, take the best pieces of their, knowledge, expertise, and technology, and then provide that, as a launch pad for agencies to transform their technology stack. So there is faith and there is hope. And hope without faith probably not good enough. It's not going to be good enough. And in terms of resilience, not good enough because AI, and then there's post-quantum type of computers and crypto and other things that's coming up. So we have to be kind of thinking a bit in the future also, and shatterproofing. AI is the biggest thing, and I think it will be. Probably it's going to be another topic in the next 5 or 10 years. And I think that has been the trend. You remember the cloud days? Data centers that used to get 3 months for a virtual machine. That was glorious. And then it was like 3 weeks. And then this cloud thing happened, seconds. And then now it's AI. I wonder what's next. I have some predictions, but I'm going to save that for a different conversation.
Thank you, Baba. That's a great closing summary. And yes, I'm struck that I think we could have that other conversation around quantum, and we could probably have it around a lot of a lot of different technologies. So we'd be very interested in obviously keeping that conversation going. And it's a great call to action to finish on there about the value of experimentation in government and the value of collaboration, which is of course pertinent to this conversation in this subject area, but also something that comes up in a lot of our conversations with governments around the world, the value of experimentation and the value of greater collaboration in a host of different areas of government delivery. So thank you very much for that closing comment. And that is, I think, where I will bring today's webinar to a close. Thank you very much to Baba and to Kelvin for joining us today. And thank you to everyone who has been watching along. Thanks too to Ping Identity for joining us as our knowledge partner. You should be receiving a survey from Global Government Forum shortly on today's webinar, and it would really help me and my colleagues here if you were able to complete it. A recording of this session will be available in the next few days on the Global Government Forum website, and there will also be a report of our discussion on the site in the next few weeks as well. So once again, thanks to everybody for coming along today, and we hope to see you at another one of our Global Government Forum webinars soon. Thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks so much, Richard. Thank you, Kelvin.
Richard.